everybody. If you don't know, I'm Theresa Wollenstein. I own Griffin Dyeworks, which is a very small, employee, natural dye business. And I also sell like weaving shuttles and null binding needles and all sorts of fiber arts tools, drop spindles and stuff. I've been dyeing for almost 20 years, probably. I started learning from Bijo Trimble around 2002, and I started helping her with Griffin Dyeworks and helping with the dye pots at the retreats and the workshops that she was teaching at the time. And that sort of turned into me helping her with the website and helping her with the business. And then eventually in 2015, she sold the business to me and I took over completely. And so Griffin Dyeworks hosts 2 one-day workshop days a year we call Fiber Frolics, and then we host a 3-day retreat that has been in Lake Arrowhead in Castaic, California, that has classes in everything from leatherworking to embroidery to wet on wet watercolor to belly dancing to whatever, and there's dyeing happening the entire time. It's a whole lot of fun. Dyeing in workshops is very different from dyeing items that you plan to sell. Just putting that out there. Most of my experience is in workshops, and it's a little more seat of your pants, just see what happens. People stuffing dye pots full of things. The results are not always perfect. So in general, let's start with this. So beware anthocyanins. If you're in any of the natural dye groups on Facebook, you will constantly see people saying, oh, you can dye with beets. Oh, red cabbage. Take all the kitchen waste and dye the stuff with it. That is not a color fast dye, right? They degrade quickly when they're exposed to light. No matter what you do, you've soaked it in soy milk, you've salt, vinegar, all these things people say, nothing is going to change the fact that they degrade when exposed to light. If you search for that on the internet, you will see that. And I highly recommend this book down there, The Art and Science of Natural Dyes. They talk about how the dyes are flavonoids and the chemical bonds that are created between the dyes and the mordants. And it's all very good information to know. At the same time, it is fun to dye with your kitchen waste and your food, just knowing that the results are not going to be permanent. You'll have to re-dye them. You'll have to use them for something else eventually. And please don't sell them to people who expect them to be a permanently dyed item, which is where the problem has been coming in. Historical dyes. I can't really cover all of time and space. If you have any specific questions about what dyes the Vikings used or what dyes were used where, put them in the chat, type them in, and we can answer them later. In general, blue is from plants. The leaves of plants that have indigo tin is the name of the flavonoid that creates blue. It is not found only in indigofera plants. There's plants in all sorts of species that have this dye that can be fermented and creates a blue color. Reds, generally kermes, lac madder, cochineal, and brazilwood around the world, creates lots of reds and oranges, pinks, and purples. Yellow, popular yellows, weld, fustic, gamboge, caricitron once it was discovered in the Americas, and many flowers create yellows that are light fast and wash fast. So type them in the chat, or feel free to ask me over social media or email if you have any questions on historical dyes. Griffin Dyeworks did get its start as like a Society for Creative Anachronism supplier of dyes and historical research. We sort of moved away from that because the audience is much bigger for general natural dyeing. So we have a lot of information on both. Murex snails, I wanted to include this because the work that this man is doing in this Facebook group is incredible, recreating the Tyrian purple and the Techolette blue and all sorts of colors from the Murex snails. What do you need to dye? A pot or a jar. I've done dyeing. I bought a bunch of mason jars and used a turkey roaster with water in it to boil water in the jars, different dyes in each of the jars with 6 going at once. It's great for sampling different dyes to see what would happen. Heat source, your stovetop, a catering stove, the sun, if you're doing sun dyeing in jars, works great. You need water, you need some kind of a gentle soap, you need the dyes, you need whatever you're going to dye, you need somewhere to put it when it's drying. Nice to have, pH test strips, bottled water, candy thermometer, measuring cups and spoons, all very handy, not required. You can fly by the seat of your pants. Steps to dye. So first, scouring. Highly recommend washing things. Some organic fabrics are not treated with whatever surface treatment it is, but most are. You'll get better coverage if you wash and rinse your items. Mordanting, we can cover in depth more later if there's questions. This mordanting, is a chemical that creates a chemical bond with the fiber that helps the dyes create a chemical bond so that the dyes stay better. There are different mordants for protein and plant fibers. Mordants can affect the end result of the color depending on what you use. You dye the thing. You can modify it further by changing the pH of the water that something is rinsed in, or by soaking it in something else like iron will deepen a color. Rinse it, wash it, and then you're done. A note on the water, everything is chemicals. Everything has chemicals in it. Your tap water is not pure H2O only. There's other minerals and other things in it that can affect your water. One of the places we had the retreat up in Castaic in the mountains, the water that came out of the hose there, we could not dye with cochineal there. For whatever reason, the minerals in it did not let us create a chemical bond with cochineal on our fiber. So we always brought in bottled water for the cochineal. The current place where we have been having the retreat in Lake Arrowhead, we had no problem. The water there was fine. Always check your pH levels. If you can get your water tested, see what minerals are in it. It's very interesting to see, and you'll find out what it is. If you're looking to get constant results, the same thing every time, you need to control every part of the process, and that includes the water that you use. The water that comes out of your tap changes regularly, so always get bottled water if you're trying to get constant results. Consistent results, that's probably a better word. Safety.
Theresa, we have a quick question. Lizette asks, I've been trying to get lichen aged in ammonia to turn purple, but it's always brown. Any advice?
I have only started looking into lichens and mushrooms. If you're not in that Facebook group, I can send you the link to it. It's very, very informative. I don't know, it might be the lichen that you're using. If you haven't looked into it, different lichens create different colors. But generally, I have a jar of lichen from like 4 years ago that I've been saving, and I don't know what color it is yet, and I'm very nervous to check. But it might be the lichen that you have. You can test lichens easily with a bleach pen. If you take a bleach pen with you and you can like sort of just color around the lichen a little bit, it'll show you what color it'll turn. So that's one quick way of testing when you're out in the field. Safety. Dyes are fine powders. Wear a mask. If your dyes are not fine powders, you'll need to grind them. Eye protection is very good. Mordants, wear gloves. Fire is hot. Hot things can burn you. Be outside in a well-ventilated area. A lot of dyes I think smell really good, so I don't mind, but sometimes the chemical dyes in the mordants can smell pretty bad. I recommend aprons and ponytail holders. Long hair and fire and hot pots is not awesome either. And don't keep any open cups of drinks around your dye pots. Things are drippy when you're moving things from pot to pot. You don't want to have a cup of coffee and alum. Disposal. I know this is sort of a concern for a lot of people of like where to put these chemicals when you're done with them. Generally, the amounts that we use, like 2 tablespoons and 4 gallons of water, is so minimal. It's not going to kill your plants. Like soda ash will kill things pretty easily. Other than that, like anything with alum or copper, any dyes that you use with that are from plant materials, you can use to water your plants with. Indigo is really the only one that I try not to dump on any plants. I just put it in like a dead dirt area in my backyard, and it's generally fine. When in doubt, add lots more water, like turn on your faucet and pour it down your sink. The sewers are made to handle everything, so it's not a big concern. This is sort of just general information. If you're collecting things out in your world and you want to see if it'll dye, this is sort of how I would go around testing it. So flowers, plants, and leaves. We treat leaves and flowers gently. If you mush them too much, or if you get them too hot, they'll just turn to brown yuckiness. Soak in water, simmer. add fiber, simmer more. And this is where harvesting season can make a big difference in the color result. Woods and barks, shave into small bits, soak it in alcohol, add water, stir, pre-dye. You can dry them out and then do it again if you need to. Most dye woods, like when we dye with Osage orange, you know, we have like, we put it in like a knee-high stocking usually, like a baseball sized amount, and it lasts for 2 or 3 dye sessions before we start to really notice that the color isn't there anymore. So if you let it dry out, there's a lot more dye in the dye woods than you expect. And my computer's not letting me, or maybe that's the end. All right, that's all the general information I have. Are there questions about specific dyes or dyeing with kitchen materials or history of dyeing? Or tell me about your experiences dyeing. Feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you make a dye solution, can you store it for X amount of time and reuse it, or do you just have to use it at the time you've
Generally,
made
you
it?
can store it. So I usually, like Indigo is the one that's like trickier, right? Because the vat needs to be at certain levels of everything. So like with Weld or Osage Orange, for example, I would just sort of simmer off as much water as I could. So I concentrate what's left to the dye pot and then put it in a smaller container. And then, yeah, you can definitely store it and use it later.
And then you just store it on a shelf. You don't have to refrigerate it or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else with specific questions? Dun, 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 dun.
I have a question I wrote in, but I asked if you could tell us a bit about dyeing cotton and what mordants are suggested to get a strong color, like from avocados.
Okay, so cotton generally, and most plant fibers. So the historical recipe is a 3-part mordanting process with alum, and then you soak it again in tannin, and then you soak it again in alum. And that would be sort of the historical way of mordanting cotton. Then modernly, a lot of people use aluminum acetate to mordant their cotton. And that's just a 1-step way to, like, everything is based on the weight of goods, right? Whatever you're dyeing, you sort of use a percentage of that for the mordant. To get a strong color on from avocados, it's going to depend more probably on the number of avocado pits you have to use.
Excuse me, I have quite a bit of the skins, but also along with the pits.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of probably having to grind them up in the coffee grinder or something before simmering.
Yeah, when I dye with avocado pits, I just leave them whole. I know a lot of people crush or grind or chop them into pieces.
You're talking about just the pits, but I'm talking about the skins also.
Yeah, no, I haven't tried with skins, so I can't say whether, I don't know whether making those smaller would matter because you're not really exposing much more surface area.
So how long would you suggest simmering, something like that, before you use it as a dye? I mean, first you'd mordant your material, you'd mordant your cotton, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And have that dried out and ready at whenever you want to use it, it's ready, it's mordant and it's ready to go.
Yeah.
And then and let's say then I wanted to take some of the avocado stuff and make a bat of color. Do I need to add anything more to the avocado simmering besides?
No, the avocado should be fine. And that's something that you can also experiment with if you wanted to see how different things change the color. You can pour some out into a jar and add some vinegar or ammonia or chalk or any sort of thing and see how it affects the color of it. I would just simmer. I would probably soak everything in water for a good while to make sure it's thoroughly wet, and then add a little bit more water and simmer just the avocados for 30 minutes before adding any fiber. And then with most dyes, it's the length of time you leave it in the pot that creates the darkness of the color.
Gotcha.
Indigo is the exception to that. So if you start, if you put your fiber in and it's at a simmer, and then you leave it for a couple hours, and then you turn off the burner and put a lid on it and then leave it overnight and check it in the morning, that's probably the way I would go with that.
Good enough. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to show you some of these die cards. I don't know how great my light is in here for you to see. So for a while, of course it's reversed. One great thing to do is to get like hanks of the same, or tie off sort of the same wool yarn and mordant it every different way and tie them onto a piece of Tyvek, like Tyvek envelopes from the post office even. And then label them so you know you have a copper mordanted yarn and you have an iron mordanted yarn, and alum mordanted and no mordant, and then you can throw the whole Tyvek thing, the whole Tyvek card into the dye pot and see what all the different results are. And that creates a really easy way of creating sort of a sample book of your dyes. So this is from Coreopsis, which is a flower. Yeah, onion skins, while not historical, create really great yellows. These are actually kind of dull. I honestly don't know how old they are. I inherited them from Bijo a while back. Indigo. And then this shows, although it's missing, indigo, when you over dye yellow with indigo, you get greens, or you could get purples. I'm trying to shade it just right. There's another flower. Goldenrod. And I'm trying to read it backwards. Oxalis is really beautiful. I think there's some blooming right now, actually, at least in Southern California. And this is henna and walnut. We don't use henna much as a dye anymore, just because the results we found were really inconsistent in the henna that we were receiving. And walnut creates a really great brown. It's the husk around the walnut, if you can beat the squirrels to it. And this, you can see at the top, was dyed with red cabbage, and it's completely white. Even if you keep it in the dark, it'll eventually fade. And this red cabbage with alum is still sort of blue, which is good. I've never heard of whortleberries before. I know Persian berries create a really great dye, and like buckthorn berries when they're green. But I think it's mostly the tannins in those that create good colors.
Lizette has a question. She's got her hand up.
Yes.
I had a question about cochineal because I've dyed with it a couple times and it comes out like this pink, like this hot pink. And how would you get it to turn red? Like, so I used bran in the water, and alum and tartar is a mordant, and like it's bright and beautiful, but how would I get it to turn red?
So, I mean, pure red is a challenge, and part of it might be the amount of dye. Hold on, let me see this. The pH of the water with cochineal is what really changes the color. So acid creates the best reds. I think usually in South America they use lime juice or like powdered lime to change the acid levels, and that might make a difference in getting like a deeper red color.
I usually use distilled water, so I should not use distilled, or?
You should use distilled water, but you just need to add acid to it.
Add lime. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
lime juice.
Okay.
Yeah, we use lime juice.
Perfect. Okay.
You can try that. Indigo from the plant or from a powder? Like the indigo that I showed in the sample?
I collect them from cactus and
Yeah.
like grind them up and put them in.
That is
So.
really fun. So the cochineal that grows wild is not as good as the cochineal, of course, that is farmed in South America and sold as a dye, right?
Okay.
Like what you could purchase from me. I should have brought some in here with me, but like the cochineal, I harvested some too. Like the cochineal bugs are pretty big, right? And it's also another one, the time when you harvest those insects off the cactus can also make a difference.
Okay.
You need to get them like right before they're at their end of life. And they have like a six month life cycle. So if you live with the cactus, you might be able to tell when that's happening.
It's in my yard. So,
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I will experiment. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I've heard that using, well, I bought some pickling salt with acid in it. I guess it's what they use. You could, I mean, I got it at, in the market somewhere where it was like, it's some kind of pickling substance that we'll actually use as like instead of ash.
Interesting. I know that like alum that we use for mordanting is the same alum that's used in pickling. So it might be related to that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Athena's question about indigo. Was that about the little card that I showed?
Yes, I was just wondering if you use the fresh cut plants when you do your indigo, or if you have a commercial powder, because I know you can get it in either of those forms. I've not had success with the powder. I've only had success when I cut the plants and boil them right then and there.
That's amazing, actually. So most of my experience with indigo so far, mainly because I have children, so I don't want to have a vat of chemicals in my backyard, is with indigo crystals, which is the pre-reduced indigo, which is chemically extracted indigo, which is much easier to work with, especially in a workshop environment. It's literally soda ash, thiox, indigo crystals, and you're set for like 5 pounds of fiber. Griffin Dyeworks also sells powdered indigo, which is organic certified. The leaves created into the powder, and it's a very dark blue powder. And I have indigo leaves, which is, it looks like it went through a mulcher, like they sent the leaves through a mulcher, and they're sort of a light greenish color leaf, which is very interesting, and I really want to experiment with them. Getting the chemicals right in the vats can be tricky, and then keeping the temperature is also tricky. So indigo powder, I know, doesn't like it to be below like 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So a lot of people, you know, like wrap their pots up with wool blankets and puts things on top of them to make sure they try to stay warm. But yeah, I mean, if you use the leaves, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, they actually, I'm in northern Minnesota, and they grow really well out here. So we've dyed many times actually with fresh cut leaves, but the 2 times I've tried to dye with the powder, I think probably we didn't have the right other chemical assistance. We and so maybe that was what happened, but it didn't work. It didn't, it hit the air and it stayed white. That was really sad.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, the powdered indigo really requires like the fermented vat, right, that uses urea or something else to create the fermentation that then creates the bond.
Okay.
So that's cool.
Okay, well, thank you.
Starting a dye garden, which plants are essential to grow? Where do you live?
Yeah.
Deborah. Can you unmute? Deborah. Southern California. Some types of indigo are considered an invasive species in California, I believe, especially in like Santa Barbara County. So check on that for sure. Madder grows really, really well out here. but it takes, I believe, 3 years before the roots are ready to be used for dyeing. Weld grows out here. Lots of flowers. You could do marigolds, chamomile, coreopsis. You could harvest dodder. You don't want that growing in your garden though. It's an invasive parasite. Right? Blue, red, yellow. That's how I generally think of the dye colors. Anything else that you get, I don't know if you can get walnuts or walnut tree, avocado tree, pomegranates. I feel like trees are much better out here, but they take a lot longer to grow for a dye garden. Anyone else have recommendations for dye plants that you've grown? No?
I'm growing, what's it called? It's like it's not a, well, eucalyptus. But I'm doing like dye printing with
Mhm.
the Mordanting. I haven't really done it to some friends. We have like a little dye group, study group, and they've had some marvelous, beautiful things. They've done mostly on silk. They mordant the silk and then later put all kinds of flowers and eucalyptus cuttings from the local mountains and hillsides here and in LA. And then there's also something I went and bought from the Thomas Paine natural what's it called? Shoot, it's like starts with an S, like a not sycamore, but something like that. I went and bought that, and I'm growing it in the backyard though, and it seems to be doing well. And that was also used for the printing, the dye printing. But I don't know if it'll actually make a color or not, except for brown or green, just like the leaf itself. I was wondering also, I've been saving these marigolds from that I bought way back in Dia de los Muertos Day, Halloween time. That was November-ish. And I'm wondering how long. I've got them in a jar. Well, not in a jar. I've got them actually in a paper bag.
Yeah.
With other stuff I've collected, and they are. I don't know. I still see the color in it, but I don't know what's going to happen when I actually add it to, start simmering, if it's actually going to produce a color or not.
They should. It'll work well. Yeah. I usually save them from like Dia de los Muertos too. I buy like a potted marigold giant thing and then save all of them.
Well, that's good to know that it'll still be
yeah, as long as they're dried and not like rotting, which
right,
paper bag, it should be fine.
That's what I started to do with some stuff, is put them in a jar, and they got mildewy, and so I said that's not going to work.
Yeah, you got to watch out for that. Yeah, woad is a good one too. I think Ursula was going to try to come, but I don't think she did. But I know that she has grown lots of dyes before as well. But like having a harvesting day with your group would probably be a lot of fun, where everyone just collects things from their kitchen and from their yard or their neighborhood and sees what you can dye with those.
Yeah, Ursula's in my dye group, in our study group, so she's been an amazing resource. Just
yeah, definitely
unbelievable, great. And I know Debbie is here. They're starting a dye garden. Debbie, you should talk about that, what they're growing in there. She doesn't want to. Debbie, just tell them, you just mentioned some of the stuff, because I mean there's like 20 different things you're growing there. You just planted them.
That many. We've got marigolds, and we're gonna do some indigo, and we've planted some Navajo tea because someone said that's really great to grow. Don't know. What else do we have? I have to get
you could probably get quite a few of the what are the Hopi sunflowers?
Yeah, we got some of those Hopi sunflowers. We got some woad, and then we're doing some red and yellow onions, Our Lady's bed straw, marigolds, I think amaranth, some chamomile, coreopsis, and then we've got some, vegetables thrown in there, some beets and whatnot. Bachelor buttons, I don't know if they're going to do anything.
Yeah.
This would be, but yeah, I think I don't know. Have you ever dyed with bachelor buttons?
I have not.
Really? I think we've read up that I, I know they make a color, but we'll find out if it lasts or not.
Yeah.
So apparently you can dye with almost anything, but it's like you said, it's a hit and miss on.
Yeah. It's a hit and miss on the color fastness. And then a lot of the times what you're dyeing with is actually just the tannins in it. Right. So like the tannins that are in tea or coffee or anything else. You can dye with tea and coffee, but it's the same as dyeing with walnuts or tree bark or eucalyptus or anything else, unless you modify it in different ways with things. Yeah, like black beans are another one of the anthocyanins that are probably not completely color fast, but they're really fun to dye with. They create a cool color.
So when you talk about color fastness, is there a time frame? I mean, I know it probably depends on how often you wash and whatnot, but and how much sun it gets. So I guess it just depends, right? There's no hard rule about that.
It definitely depends. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle, you happy? I'm gonna go on mute now.
Fennel, the fennel tops people have dyed and gotten a green from. I've been saving mine this year, but I haven't dyed with them yet to see how color or light fast they are, because that's the one thing that the person that dyed with them did not have an answer for either. So that might be something fun to grow if you do a winter dye garden next year. Rhubarb, somebody has said, but I think that one is also mostly tannins in the rhubarb that are creating color and not anything more exciting than that.
Hi, Theresa, I have a question on these with the black beans. In fact, today I just did a big pot of black beans with 10 cups of water and all these black beans. And can I put that up like in a plastic jug and keep it for a little while before I dye? And does it need a mordant?
So black beans aren't going to be a permanent dye, but you can have fun with it. I think that the color in it might disappear if you store it for too long. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, out of the liquid that I made.
Yeah.
The liquor. I love to call it liquor. Okay, well that's good. I'll do it soon then and see what I get. But
Yeah,
do you think I need to soak my yarn in anything?
I think Mordanting would probably help with any color fastness.
Hi, this is me.
Sure. Hi.
I'm just so out of it today. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Mordanting would help with any of the color fastness compared to non-mordanted, but that could be another experiment. If you're willing to
try
do, right?
alum. Should I just try alum or whatever I have? Yeah, okay. Okay.
Everybody
looks great. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to
I'm
be
looking
here
at
with
everybody's backgrounds. Like Debbie's got this cool rainbow thing with the dark to light happening. I love it.
Yeah, she's got that color gamp going. I know. Tina's got a cute hat on. Did you make your hat, Tina? It's darling.
Yes.
Cute. Okay, thank you.
So those of you that have dyed with natural dyes before, what have you used and what were your results and what did you think of the process?
I love to do indigo pots.
Hmm.
I did a bunch of indigo and I did a little bit of woad this summer, but to get the woad powder is way more expensive than the indigo. So I did more indigo than woad. And I was just dumping like everything in the indigo pot: silk, cotton, wool. I had some faux cashmere that comes out, you pull it out and it's like purple instead of the green. So that was real cool. And then it stays darker than the other things in the indigo pot. It stays like a really darker blue. So that was very fun. So I was just doing indigo craziess.
I think that's what happens to people. They start a vat and they're like, I need to put everything in this.
Yeah, I was just like a crazy person. And I did a little bit from black walnut. It was And then I had some old elderberry that was like oh, I can throw it away or I can shove it in a pot. And that did a little bit of an interesting, I just put a little in a jar with some stuff. So that was
very cool.
I'm out in Ohio, and one of the things that my mom and I have used, especially on cotton, that seems to last for like ever, is sumac berries. It's fun to do that, and it comes out like it's like a dark pink, light purple, and then it slowly faded out a little bit into like a light pink, but it stayed light pink for like the last 10 years after that.
Very nice. I don't think I've ever dyed with prickly pear fruit. That sounds fun. Vibrant pink to mellow. Very nice.
I tried something the other day. I did a copper sulfate. So like to put it in, and it came out like this right here, which is my favorite color. But yeah, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah, some of the Mordants themselves create the colors. So like tannin is itself like a brown dye, like if you were tea dyeing or something. Copper can turn things blue. Iron can sometimes turn things grayish. You need to be careful with iron and protein fibers because it will eat away at them. I had some yarn somewhere that it was tagged like iron indigo. I don't know why I put something with iron and indigo, and I just like picked it up and like crushed in my hands into dust. It was not good. Anyone else dye before or plan to dye something? Have any specific questions about dyeing in history? I know a lot. I could talk on any topic.
We're well, I'm doing a kind of a semi-report for our little group and everybody's been assigned some part of history to talk about how dye has influenced that civilization. And I'm not finding a lot in China. I mean, it didn't seem to come in. It seemed like they borrowed from everybody else for a long time. I mean, they had beautiful brocade, coats for the royalty and everything. And it was a hierarchy, prestige, what you could wear and what you couldn't wear. But it was like, well, what was it? It wasn't like till the 1800s or something that China actually started growing their own dyes or using their own dyes. Everything else had been taken from other threads or materials. You know more about any of China's history of dyeing?
So it's interesting that you say that they borrowed from everyone else. My major in college was international relations. So China actually, instead of invading all the countries around it, they just sort of created a tithing system where all the countries around China owed them essentially for not invading, right? It's like an extortion scheme. And this was their system of governance around the world. So it's very likely that they used this in order to get the dye stuff from other places, especially along the Silk Road. But I know they did use kermes and lac for their reds and gamboge for yellow. It's a tree in Southeast Asia, but those are, again, things that they could have gotten from Vietnam or from India and not grown themselves or developed themselves. They were very busy making silk, so I understand.
They were, that seems like those were the actual, there was only 4 or 5 dyes that they actually produced in China, and those ones that you mentioned were mentioned in the articles I've read. The funny thing is that I was kind of surprised at how late in civilization, because I mean everything was trade. China was the big, the Silk Road was infamous through India and the Euro-Asian countries. But it was very surprising. I just thought, wow, they didn't really have their own. I mean, I've done cochineal before. I've collected it off the cactus, and not quite enough because it always came out too light pink, and then I never did use a mordant, and it was very disappointing. But we're gonna try again, right, Debbie?
Especially if you've got Ursula there helping you, because she's traveled to Oaxaca and learned from native
Yeah, she's
cochineal farmers.
Her Peruvian studies are, astronomical. She's just got a plethora of information. And I grew up in Mexico, and I've traveled through Oaxaca, and all the weeding and everything always fascinated me as a teenager. But of course, I couldn't afford to support myself and do all that until I was an old lady.
Of course. There's a question in the chat about turmeric. I have dyed with turmeric. I don't know if you know about the Society for Creative Anachronism, medieval recreationists. I was creating a veil for one of my friends who had a South Indian persona. She pretended to be from South India, essentially. So I dyed a very fine muslin with turmeric, and then I was doing stamping with indigo paste on it to create a pattern in green on yellow, and then I dyed part of it in indigo to make it green more all over, and like a blue. And I washed it before I sent it to her, and the turmeric washed out. So that happened. It still looked good because it was, blue and green and stuff, but yeah, the turmeric did not last.
Is there a way to make it light fast?
Nope.
Oh, so it's like beet juice. Okay.
Yeah, it's for fun. It'll last a couple of washes, maybe more. But yeah, I was reading like Wikipedia articles and stuff today on the anthocyanins and indigotin and the flavonoid names of all the different dye colors. And I was surprised that in the yellow dye Wikipedia entry, they talk about how in India, they use turmeric to dye monks' robes.
Right.
And I believe it's actually Kamala.
What is Kamala?
Kamala is, I don't know. It's I get it as a powdered dust, and it's it kind of and it creates sort of in the orangey red monk robe colors.
Interesting.
It's a good color. I think it's a sawdust from a tree.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any advice on walnut shells? Grind them small. Kamala is the vice president. Kamala is a dye. Walnut shells, grind them as small as you can. Soak them in water. Simmer with some additional water. Add your fiber. Simmer everything together. Leave it overnight. Oh, there we go. Kamala is from a tree. Oh, from the seeds. Interesting. Yeah, for a while we were getting beautiful, amazing results from the Kamala that I was receiving from our supplier. And then one time I got it from them, and no matter what we did to it, it just created mud in the bottom of the jar, and it never dissolved. It was wild. I don't know whether they sent me the wrong stuff, or they received the wrong stuff, or it got mixed with something else, but it was mud. And I honestly haven't ordered any since, because I don't know if I can find a supplier that's reliable. And I can't find anyone that'll send me just a little sample from India. They're like, you need to spend so much in order to pay for the shipping. So it's the challenges of importing stuff from abroad. Eventually I'll be able to travel, and that will be fun.
I have another question.
Sure.
Regarding the anthocyanins or whatever, the fugitive dyes.
Yeah.
That's what I guess they call them, as a fugitive dye, fugitives or something. Anyways, this book you mentioned, the natural, or the Art and Science of Natural Dyes, does that kind of list everything, and it says whether or not it's going to be color fast? Or is there, a Bible?
That's probably the closest thing to the Bible. I don't know that it's going to list everything, but it'll give you at least a guide, so you can say, oh, you know what? That's one of those things. That's not going to last.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question about historical sources. I'm really interested in the process and the historical, and the one that I've been using, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. It's Plictho, right? How do you pronounce that?
Plictho.
Click though. Is there something comparable to that? Do you know that has like just a whole bunch of like really great recipes?
So, no, I'm piggybacking a lot of my research off of my mentor, Bijo Trimble, Mistress Flavia in the SCA. And in her research, she found that basically because dye recipes were kept very secret and they were often shared wrong so that no one would get the right results. They'd be like, oh, sure, I'll teach you how to do this, and then give the completely wrong instructions, right? So it's actually a challenge to find a good medieval resource. Plicto is one of the better ones. And then there's a lot of people who just sort of from their own experimentation, right, figured out, well, these people used this for doing this, so we can use these things for getting these results, right? So a lot of the times the people that do like leather work and tanning leather, the chemicals and the processes that they use either create things that then dyers could use or use the same chemicals as dyers, so that like experimental archaeology wise, they're sort of figuring it out step by step.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for adding the links. All right, we're gonna go for like 10 more minutes if anyone else has any questions.
I have a question about alum.
Sure.
Do you use like chemist alum? I know I've heard people say, well, I use, I just buy alum at the grocery store. And I'm like, that is not the right kind. So
it'll work. It's probably not as powerful.
Right.
I've used that alum. I've used rock alum that I can get at the Armenian grocery store up the street from me. And it's literally like a little clearish rock, like a giant piece of salt is what it looks like. And it's not as strong as the alum that I can get. The alum that I use and buy and sell is aluminum potassium sulfate.
Okay.
And some people use slightly different chemical compounds of aluminum for their dyeing, and it all seems to be about the same thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Because the alum in the grocery store is sold in such a small amount, it's usually not worth it.
Have you done any dyeing with lichens?
No, I've collected lichens and I've put them in ammonia, and then I look at the jars and I think I should really open those and see what they look like now. We had Alyssa Allen down here about 2 years ago, I think. And she hosted a workshop she taught a workshop that I was hosting, but I was incredibly sick at the time and ended up in the emergency room the next morning. So I did not pay any attention to it and have no idea what happened. But it was great. She's a wonderful teacher if you ever have the opportunity. She does mushrooms and lichens, and she harvests them herself in the Pacific Northwest. I think she's in Oregon.
What is her name again?
Alyssa. I'll put it in the chat too. Alissa. And let me get the link to the mushroom and lichen dyeing group that she is a part of.
My daughter's favorite food in the whole stinking world is mushrooms.
That's funny.
I don't understand that, but I would love to make her something out of my wool with mushroom dyes.
That would be fabulous. And there's so many great colors from mushrooms too. It'll be really pretty.
So I want to learn more about that.
I tossed a link to the group in there. Her business page is also called Mycopigments, and her website is Mycopigments and all of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. I'm just checking to make sure nobody messaged me on another screen while I was looking at this one. Trying to see if I had any cool results in here.
No.
So we didn't talk about indigo a whole lot. Indigo is unique in that it is technically a pigment that attaches chemically to the outside of the fiber. And this is why indigo crocks, it can rub off on you. Like when jeans were dyed with indigo, it would rub off like between your legs and on your knees. So with indigo, instead of leaving it in the pot for a long period of time, you take it out, you rinse it to rinse off any of the pigments that are on the outside but not chemically bound, and then you would dip it again in the indigo. So one of the times at a workshop or retreat, this is wool yarn, so I mean wool and indigo are not best friends the way the cotton and indigo are. You can see the colors, so it shows the different like dip strengths. So it was a fairly exhausted indigo pot, so it started this color, and as I dipped consecutively, you can see how the colors got darker and darker and changed a little bit.
Interesting.
And because things look darker when they're wet, when someone is happy with the color of their indigo dyeing, we usually have them dip it one more time, because when it dries, it'll end up drying lighter than it appears to be when it's wet. And I know a lot of people are I mean, if you get into the Facebook groups on natural dyeing, they're kind of purists about doing the fermented vat indigo dyeing versus the indigo crystals, the pre-reduced indigo. But I honestly haven't had any problems with the pre-reduced indigo. Like this is a shibori, and I washed it with the rest of my laundry 3 or 4 times, and it's still the color that it was when I pulled it out and dried it the first time. So it is no less color fast than anything else. It's no more prone to crocking than any other indigo.
Yeah, I did a kind of a more cheatery, not a whatever. And I felted with my indigo, and it's still, I mean, that puts it through tons of washing all at once. And yeah. I have great colors in my indigo still.
Yeah, it is not a problem.
Debbie asks, when you rinse the indigo between dips, is it a quick single rinse?
Yeah, that's what I usually do. We have we use kitty litter buckets filled with water, and I just stick it in, swish it around, pull it out, squeeze out any excess water. Wearing gloves, because indigo will stick to your skin when it is wet, no matter what. Yeah.
Also, don't wear something that you don't want blue in your dyeing indigo, because it goes to all the fibers.
Including your shoes and your socks.
Oh, yes, it'll get everything blue.
All right, we have a few minutes for any other last minute questions.
How old do you think indigo has been around?
Very, very long time, because one of the interesting facts I saw on the Wikipedia page today about it was because there's indigo plants all over the world, it was really difficult for the scientists to figure out through plant DNA like what the original indigo plant was and where it came from. And because it is everywhere, it has been around for a very long time.
Oh.
And Theresa, is then woad in that family from England?
Yeah, I don't remember the chemical name for woad. I don't think it's an Indigofera family plant, but it has the indigo tin in the leaves,
Okay.
just like some other plants.
Oh, some other plants do also.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a plant in, I think Southeast Asia. It's like a Bucephalus specifica or something, and it has indigo tin in the leaves, and that's what they used for their indigo. Oh yeah, Goddess tinctoria is woad.
I had an interesting thing happen with indigo. I wove a piece that was in hand woven. This was years and years ago, that had tinsel in it, the fibered tinsel, and cotton. So I was weaving the pattern in tinsel and the background was in cotton, and dyed it in a very, very heavy indigo vat. I mean, it was commercial grade, really. I mean, anyway. And when it came out, I was so disappointed because you could see no differentiation between the pattern and the background at all.
Mm-hmm.
And about a year later, it just started fading. It took about a year, and it is just beautiful now that pattern just came out just beautifully in it. But it took a really long time, and I only washed it, the first time. I didn't.
Do you know if
keep
it
washing
faded
everything.
from the cotton or from the tinsel?
I would think the cotton is what. I'm not sure, actually. I'll have to go look at that. I'm sorry, I don't know which one's lighter now. I can't remember. It's downstairs. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting because I was so disappointed, that it ruined. I was mad. It ruined my weaving. I was like,
right.
And then now it's just so beautiful. So I don't know, is tinsel a cellulose fiber?
It is, yeah. I think tinsel's made from bamboo waste.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or some kind of tree, anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the way that it's, like chemically processed into fibers and stuff probably really affects the way that it can take dyes.
The dye, handle it.
Yeah, I think all of the plants with indigo tin are all in the family. If you see in the chat, the Brassicaceae, like the ones that like broccoli and everything is from. But there's so many species all over the world, hundreds and hundreds that have it in there. Yeah, and Indigofera tinctoria is like the default best, has the most indigo tin in it. A lot of places like the woad doesn't have as much in it, so it ends up creating a different shade of blue as well as different results when you over dye it. Even if you intentionally created like a weak Indigofera tinctoria pot, just because it's chemically just different enough, it creates different shades of blue. All right, last questions.
I was just looking in my book here, the wild colors, and about pomegranate, because I just had a horrible experience with pomegranate. Just did not work at all. I had a bush. There was a bush at our local orchard, and I waited for it before the squirrels got it, and collected dozens and dozens of them, and waited for them to dry up, and then tried to dye with them, and it just faded into nothing. It just I didn't mordant though, but it is supposed to be a mordant. It's used as a mordant dye, it says, in Southeast Asia and India.
Yeah, it's very strong in tannins.
Just didn't work for me. I don't know if I didn't simmer it enough. I don't know.
Maybe. I saved my pomegranate rinds this past year too. I have them drying in a paper bag. So I'm gonna
good.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet. I have a couple more pomegranates to get through. and then I'll try them. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. GriffinDyeworks.com is my website, and Griffin Dyeworks on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and anywhere else you could possibly think of. I'm happy to answer questions anytime over email or chat if you think of something random. I'll be working on adding, I don't know where I put it, all of the dye recipes that I've inherited onto our website, so they'll be searchable. Also hidden on the Griffin Dyeworks website is a section called Understanding Mordants and Modifiers, which has a list of like anything you can use to mordant or change the colors and modify what you're dyeing, as well as the amounts, the history of them. And it's really useful. And I'm planning on turning it into an ebook, so it's a little more helpful than being lost on a website somewhere. So look forward to that too. Thank you all for coming. I do ship to Canada. It's not cheap, as I'm sure you know, being Canadian. I'll stay here for a minute or two if you think of anything. Thank you all. Have a good night. Stay warm.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. And thank you, Theresa. It was awesome. There's a lot of thank yous coming in the chat.